Hi, and welcome to DisruptEDtv. And today's guest is Cory Radisch. Cory is the principal at the Regional Alternative School Monmouth Ocean Educational Services Commission. And we'll talk more about that a little later on. But the disruptive idea today, our purpose in the program is to present you with an idea that changes your school, improves the experience for the teachers and for the students. And our idea today is a phrase that Cory used in our conversations before the program, school leadership, and you have a very particular definition of that. But I want to start by what I think I got from that, Cory. We were talking about school choice, but not in the traditional sense, not in the sense most of us understand it. It's the choice that students can make to learn at their own pace and in their own way. If teachers have the courage, I think you mentioned, I think that's how you called it, what you referred to it as. So go ahead, maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, I think if we look at the landscape of education, we really haven't changed that much over the last 200 years. I mean, you went from a one-room schoolhouse, and in some of the things that I do, I travel around and I look in classrooms, and they're set in rows with the teacher desk in front, which is really traditional. And we've dictated to kids what they need to take in. So we have a curriculum, and we have to get through the curriculum, and we hear that all the time. I have 180 days to get through the curriculum, and we do get a sense of urgency. Teachers have a sense of urgency to get through the curriculum. But here's a funny thing. I kind of looked it up, and I've never heard of a teacher getting fired for not getting through the entire curriculum. So we have to teach kids where they are. So for starters, we need to know where they are. We need to get a baseline. We need to get a foundation. But then we need to empower kids to have a say in how they're going to learn and maybe the product they're going to give us to demonstrate their learning versus just some of the traditional methods of worksheets and things of that nature.
Okay, great. Now you mentioned too before the program school leadership, and I guess I picked up on that phrase. You have a very particular definition of school leadership. Maybe you could talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, I think school leadership is doing what's right for kids, not what's easy.
Okay.
And I think that, this is said with all due respect. I think a lot of times people in a leadership position, they sometimes lead with fear. And they're afraid to challenge the status quo. They're afraid to challenge the traditions. And we should have traditions, but we also need to be transformational. And the impetus there is that you want to do whatever we can to benefit the learning of students. And if that means that it has to change, the format has to change, then we need to do that. And I don't think that we've advanced far enough in all these years to meet kids where they are. We're in the 21st century, yet we still are very comfortable using 20th century practices, and that needs to change.
What they should be doing really is providing a platform for continual improvement in the educational.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the moment you think that you can't learn or you can't grow, I think there's a quote out there that says that's when you start dying. And I don't think I know it all. And there's times that I listen to the feedback, I listen to the complaints, I listen to the compliments, and for both teacher and student. And I want to be as a reflective leader as possible. And it doesn't always mean you're going to do it right or you're going to be liked. But at the end of the day, if your decision making is based on what's best for kids and meeting their needs based on where we are as a country and where our kids are in the digital age, then we have to be transformational, and there's no other option.
Right.
Now you go around, but one of the things you do is you make presentations before professional learning communities and school audiences, basically, where you talk about this. And I know you've gathered some statistics in your research from the World Economic Forum. Maybe you
a few different things that, part of it has been, some inspiration from a guy named David Culberhouse who really talks about, discourse and disruption. And the problem is when you talk about discourse and disruption, people think that there's an arrogance to that or they're going to be in trouble, and that's not the case. But you have to have the conversation if you want things to change. And the World Economic Forum, in 2020, the top 3 skills that they think employers will be looking for is complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity. And so the question we have to ask is, what are we doing in our classrooms that are promoting those 3 things to prepare kids for the workforce? If we're saying that we have 21st century schools, we're getting kids college and career ready, what does that actually mean? And are we creating assignments and are we creating opportunities for kids to explore these things and come out of a shell from underneath, worksheets and standardized tests and things of that nature.
Are we preparing kids for life?
Preparing them for life.
Yeah,
Right.
preparing it for life for a world in 2020 and beyond that's going to
Exactly.
expect these kinds of skills
Yeah.
from them. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, you can program a computer to do a lot of things that we used to teach kids how to do. So a lot of the learning that I remember experiencing as I was growing up has since been replaced by computers. But for all the talk of artificial intelligence, I can't imagine a computer ever replacing critical thinking, creativity, a lot of those basic core values.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that people in the technology world will tell you that it will happen eventually. That computers will be able to think, will be able to have emotion, but we'll believe that when we
We'll
see
believe
it.
that when we see them. Until then, we have to prepare children to be adults in a world that's going to require that.
Correct, and we have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Right.
I go to the doctor and I have allergies, but I'm not feeling well, and he says I have a sinus infection, and he's wheeling around an iPad on a stick.
Right.
And when he goes to prescribe me something, he's looking on the iPad, and I said, "Doc, what are you doing?" And he says, "I want to see what interacts with your allergy medication." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well, shouldn't you just have memorized that? Shouldn't you just know that?"
Uh,
So if we have people in the medical field who save lives working with technology to make it easier and more efficient to do things, why are we not doing that all across the board in our classrooms across the country?
No, that's a
very
good
good
point.
point.
So we want to raise kids to be able to make good decisions, not just to process data, because that's what computers do.
Sure. What we need them to be able to use the technology in a way that gets them the information, and then they can apply that information. The idea that we're going to get creative learners by getting them to memorize out of a textbook, when that's not the way anybody sitting at this table does it. If you don't know something, you go right to your phone, you Google it, you look it up. If my lawnmower breaks, I go on YouTube. I figure out on YouTube somebody who has had the same problem,
Yeah.
and I fix my lawnmower.
That's how you do it.
And I learn by doing. So the idea of sitting in rows and just hearing information and not having kids collaborate is something that needs to be identified and needs to be worked on.
Right. It's time for our first break, and we'll be back with Cory and get some more of your ideas.
All right,
Right,
great.
more DisruptED TV right after this.
Yep.
Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Alcini.
My name is Joe Osamendi.
Boy, it's always great working with
Absolutely,
you. And we
yeah.
have a terrific guest today. His name is Cory Radisch, and he's talking to us about what he refers to as school leadership, which is which picks up a topic we were discussing during the break. I know that any school could count on the state government or the federal government to come up with regulations about grades and about testing. But when it comes to teaching kids how to be creative or good problem solvers, that's pretty much up to the individual teachers in the classroom, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to the individual teacher, and then the grade level, the department, the administration, all the way up to central office. It really has to be a collaborative effort to do that. But teachers in one classroom can do that on their own. They can do some of their own professional development. They can research different things, and they can attempt it, and they have to feel safe in attempting it. The issue that I think that has happened, especially here in New Jersey, is with Achieve NJ and the amount of evaluations and the difference with SGOs and every acronym under the sun, we've created an atmosphere almost of fear for teachers to explore and take those risks. And as a leader in a school, and I've said it everywhere I've been, some have believed it and some don't believe it. You go fail. I actually said at a district meeting, the first meeting that when I got hired was, I look forward to you failing, and the faces that I saw were just jaw-dropping. And that's the goal, because our kids are going to fail every single day, and we want them to take that feedback and grow from that. So it's really no different as an adult learner in changing your pedagogy or changing your craft. And I think teachers should take that risk. And, I had a conversation with a teacher today who we were working on rubrics, and I said, why don't you let the kids develop their own rubric?
Right.
And, assess their own learning and provide the feedback, and you'll be amazed at what you see. And the response was, it worked. I couldn't believe it. Even kids who I thought wouldn't be into it were giving me feedback, say, I need to do this better, I need to work on this better. But, to your point about state government, and you think about, them getting their hands in, people who've never really been in a classroom. We had talked earlier on about how Finland was doing a national redesign of their schools,
Right.
4,800 schools. Now think about that from an American perspective. Imagine we were going to do a national redesign of the physical space, the learning environments, the pedagogy. It's just not going to happen. But I will tell you some things that are interesting here in New Jersey, that the redesign has only been on the standardized test.
Huh.
So starting in the early 80s with the minimum basic skills test, and changing to HSBT, to HESPA, to, and then all the way up and now to PARC. So,
Right.
The federal or the state government loves to throw different standardized tests at us and say, okay, get all kids to achieve at this level. And we know that that's, not really going to happen.
It's impossible.
It's not realistic.
Yeah,
No,
it's
but,
not
realistic.
But each individual school can find their own path through
Right.
this. And uniformity and conformity are not necessarily virtues in this environment.
No.
I mean, every school is in a different neighborhood. Every neighborhood has a different set of requirements, a different profile of students. You've got to do the right thing and see that in business anyway, doing the right thing is what you want everybody to be looking to do. And what you want your managers to do is to look for ways to catch people doing the right thing. Usually we're busy trying to catch people doing things wrong.
Yeah.
And that change in mindset, I think, is also part of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think, there's a difference between working from the deficit model, where you are always looking for things that are going wrong, to accountability. I mean, any leader has to have accountability in their organization, no matter what that organization is. And I think Todd Whitaker is the one who said that the culture of an organization is defined by the worst behavior the leader allows.
Yeah, good quote.
And those are some things that, when you get into leadership, and you have to be willing to engage in some of those conversations, but also highlight those teachers that are doing exceptional things. And it could be, a card in their mailbox that gets them off of duty. It could be a card in their mailbox that says, you get to leave early on Friday, pick a day, let me know.
Just an acknowledgement. That
Just an
they're doing the
acknowledgement,
right
because
thing. Right.
obviously we can't, I'd love to give them money,
Right.
but we can't do
It's not
that.
gonna happen.
So the number one thing people want at their job is recognition. They want to feel
Thank you.
right. They want to
Sense of
feel valued. But it's a very difficult balance, because if you have people who are not meeting those expectations and you choose to ignore that conversation, then you really are not going to have advancement. And if you have that going on, your best people are eventually going to get really upset, and they're going to say, wait a second, if I'm really busting my hump to try to meet the needs of kids, and this person is doing it this way, why? Why am I going to do it that way? And I had a conversation just recently with a teacher from a former district who said, why am I going to volunteer when these people can do different things that don't meet the expectations, and nobody calls them out on
And
it?
nobody seems to care. And that actually, training school administrators to identify those little miracles when they happen and call attention to them is how you get them to grow and how you get more of them.
It's funny you say miracles, because there's a term I use called miracle moments.
Really.
And we need to identify those miracle moments. And if that means that a kid who is in 5th grade is reading at a 1st grade level, but by the end of the year is reading at a 3rd grade level, well, balloons should come out of the ceiling, a parade
Absolutely.
band should come down the hall. But government doesn't recognize that. So it's incumbent upon us as leaders in education to celebrate even the tiniest of miracles, to be sure that our teachers feel valued and our students feel valued. One of the things that I do when I start a meeting is we start with something called a check-in. And they have to share something. They don't have to, but if they're willing, share something positive that has happened since the last time we've had a PLC meeting.
Right.
Something a kid has advanced. There was an act of kindness, whatever it may be, and it changes the vibe of a meeting, because a lot of times, especially in education, a meeting starts out with a lot of complaining.
And positivity is great.
Right.
It's contagious.
Right, so be able to do that, and it's tough. In the beginning, when you're first starting out, if you're with a new staff, it's kind of you hear crickets, and then you kind of have to rein it in so that you can stay focused on
Right.
the agenda.
That's great. Now, have you in this? I know your background is the public school system. Do you perceive there's much of a difference between a private school, a charter school, let's say, and a public school when it comes to this?
No, because I think good instruction is good instruction. So
Okay.
I don't think it matters if it's violin lessons at someone's house, or if it happens to be in a parochial school or a private school. At the end of the day, kids are going to need that individualized understanding of where they are in order to get them where they need to be.
Right.
The disruptive part of that is that's a lot of work. And we have a challenge in front of us to recognize that it will take more work to use the data, to use different tools in order to make sure that our kids are excelling at a pace that they haven't been excelling at.
Exactly. Now, we're going to have to disrupt our conversation for just a minute for our next break.
Right.
Okay, we'll be right back with Cory.
Right back with Cory, and we'll be right back with DisruptEDtv.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
And my name is Joe Osamendi.
This is a great program. I mean,
Yeah.
Cory, I think the disruptive offering, your disruptive offering, is that a small change in mindset on the part of a teacher or an administrator can make a big difference in outcomes. And that's don't wait for the state to tell you to do it, because they never will. They're not in that business. And don't wait for the federal government to do it, because there's just one federal government and there are hundreds of thousands of schools. So this is something that has to be done locally within the school, and every teacher has the power to do that. What's your background? How did you come to learn this yourself?
You know, it's funny that I was a phys ed and health teacher, and I was going for my administrative degree, and I was doing an internship, and I was told to write, and I mean I was told to write a grant. And I wrote a grant for positive behavior support because the district that I was in was the number 2 K-8 district for suspensions in the county. And they thought something had to be different. And that really stuck with me because they were doing things the same way for so long and there was no improvement. And we all know what that is, the definition of doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So we wrote the grant for positive behavior support, and it was a grant between the State Department and UMDNJ. And we had a liaison who came in and worked with us on collecting data, and I really started to get into the data side of education, almost analytics, like if we were talking, the World Series is going on right now. And it was amazing to see some of the data on our discipline and where it was taking place, the time of day it was taking place, and were there things to the facility that we could change that may alter that? Were there some things to the schedule that may need to be changed? And that was a big collaborative process, where we brought kids in, we brought teachers in, and we brought supervisors in to analyze that data, almost do some data walks and say, okay, look at the time of day here and look at this setting. And we found some unique things that were going on in the building at the time. And so as
things, these numbers,
the numbers
measurable
that
things.
numbers that kind of that said that we thought that there would be more disruption in the afternoon versus the morning because middle schoolers are usually tired, and
Sure, you'd
but
figure.
we were wrong. We found out that there was more disruption early in the morning.
Really?
And
So you figured a way to measure disruption, and you did.
Yeah.
And you saw that what you thought
sure,
was not right.
right. So my getting into learning and understanding different methods really came from that. It spawned from writing the grant and then working with this gentleman and saying to use data as a story, and what does the data tell us? And as much as I'm not into standardized testing, there's data there that can help us tell a story. So from there, the gentleman who was his name was Rob March. He saw me present to the staff at the current time and asked me to go with him to Cincinnati and to Washington, D.C. And help present. And that's how I got into doing some of the consulting and really starting to look at myself as an educator and how I can be, and this is the term that I use all the time, a merchant of hope.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
So, and I think, and we had talked earlier that before any technological advance, before any change in our craft, when you walk through the schoolhouse doors, you have to believe that you're an agent of change, that you will make a difference in the lives of kids each and every day. And when you get kicked and beat and roughed up and you're frustrated, you have to show up the next day believing that you're a merchant of hope for our students.
Be sure you're right and go up, then go ahead, like Davy Crockett said.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like a paraphrase of whether you can believe you can reach the kids or whether you believe you can't. You're right.
Right.
Either way, you're right.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to, people on a mission really can't be stopped. And I think Baruti Kafeli said that. And there'll be bumps and there'll be obstacles and there'll be detours and you have to accept those as well. And you have to use that kind of data as well to adjust on the fly sometimes, or adjust a practice, or adjust certain procedures and things of that nature. But that's how I got into really starting to learn about data and saying, how can I be better every day? How can I be better every day, even as an administrator, when sometimes your staff may not be feeling it, right? May not be seeing it eye to eye, and still realize that at the end of the day, you're making decisions in the best interest of kids. So you put your head down on the pillow at night and you feel pretty good.
And you
about
can't be
yourself.
afraid to take risk.
No, you can't be afraid to take risks, and you have to be willing to lead alone. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. And you have to be willing to deal with the consequences that come from that if it doesn't work.
Right.
But if you're true to your core, and the core would be our kids, and doing everything we can for them, then one thing that is curious to me is lawyers take an oath, I believe, and doctors take an oath, but educators, we don't take an oath.
Huh.
Right.
That is interesting.
And I think that what we do is as important as any doctor has to do.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're forming young minds.
If you were to take an oath, though, what would you promise? What would be your promise?
And it's funny that you bring that up. And one of the things that we're working on right now, and I'm so proud of our staff at the Regional Alternative School, is we're working on collective commitments. And this is a great activity to try. And I'll be happy to share it with anybody, if they reach out, and we'll talk about that later on.
Okay.
But collective commitments are the behaviors we're willing to commit to as educators, to make sure that our kids are safe and make sure our kids learn.
And they don't have to be big commitments. They can be small commitments.
Yeah, they could be small
Little-
commitments.
Little tiny behavioral changes,
Right.
little alterations in the normal
One of the
trajectory
best,
of the day.
sorry to cut you off, but one of the best ones that I've seen was I want to treat kids the way I want my own kids to be treated.
Absolutely.
Well,
Right?
that's,
Which is like the golden rule.
Right.
Sure, that is.
But sometimes we lose sight of that as educators, and we think, wait a second, we wouldn't want our kids being treated, our own children being treated that way. But these commitments are something that we develop, and it's not top down. It's not, I'm saying these are the commitments.
Right.
We ask everybody to develop 3 commitments, 3 behaviors that they're willing to, go to bat for every single day to make sure that our kids, are successful. And then we get a giant list.
Right.
And
You make
then,
a good point too, because if you give somebody the opportunity to make those commitments, it's sustainable.
Yeah.
Because they'll do
If
it.
they make them themselves.
Right, if they make them
They're
themselves,
told
they'll
what
do
to
it.
change,
Exactly.
they won't change.
Right.
But if they volunteer to change it and stick to it.
sure,
Right.
and
Then they will.
empower them to be a part of that process versus, just 5 people on a committee
Right.
that are creating a mission statement.
That is so powerful.
And then,
what have you seen as people have actually adopted this approach? I mean, have you seen changes?
yeah, 2 districts ago, I, some of the comments that I saw from there was it made people reinvent themselves. It made people remember why they got into the profession. It kind of brought them back to that foundational core of what we do each and every day.
Why did I become a teacher?
Right, and regardless of title.
Right.
And that's one of the things I say consistently, and anybody who's ever been around me, you will hear me say regularly, regardless of title.
Right.
It doesn't matter. I mean, the custodian in the building has a purpose to make sure that our kids are successful, right?
That's
Some
it.
people don't look at it like that.
Right.
But these collective commitments, the activity is fun, and it's also hard because as you're narrowing them down, you're thinking, oh, I want this commitment, but I don't know if I want that commitment. And eventually we come up with about 7 commitments. And I got to thank Ken Williams and Tom Hyrick for suggesting that to me, where we then print them up. The kids are able to see them. We share it with the kids.
That's important.
That these are the commitments. These are the behaviors our teachers, our educators are willing to do each and every day for you. And I've had teachers in the past actually start to do that in their own classrooms.
Right.
So student collective, what are the student behaviors they're willing to commit to? And like you said, they're willing to stick to it when they get the chance
Because
to.
because
Right,
they
versus-
got to self-select it.
Right, versus hammering the rules at them on the first day.
That is so important. We're going a little long on this segment because I think your message is so important. But I just sort of wanted to add, because this resonates with us. When people express a certain amount of vulnerability, meaning I am willing to change, I can see how I can be better, and they share that with the people they serve, even if it's a kid. What you elicit from that child is a commitment to change to be a better student.
Right.
Because when it becomes an argument, I can be as tough as you can be. I mean, nobody wins that battle.
Right.
So that whole idea that I'm willing to, you know what, let's try something else. Let's try, I think that's a huge aspect of your value proposition. And we're at that part of our program where you get to talk about how people can reach you and how you can help them. And there's your camera right there. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, if you'd like to connect more and talk about how to disrupt ed, you can reach me on Twitter at RADISCH_WC. The WC stands for World Changer, because if you believe you can change the world, it can happen. You can also email me at cradishmarsd@gmail.com. That'll come up on your screen. And you can also call me at 609-651-7714. I'd love to an opportunity to speak with you or work with your school district and help you continue to transform the lives of young people.
Cory Radisch, what a pleasure to have you.
Thank you guys so much.
for joining us today on Disrupt
Thank you.
Ed
Been a
TV.
great
Appreciate it.
guest.
Thank you.
You have a
And
great message.
That was a
sir.
great message.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
thank all of you for joining us on the program, DisruptED TV. My name is Alcini.
I'm Joe Osamendi.
And thanks again, Cory. And we'll
pleasure.
see you again next time.
Yep. Thanks, Cory.
All right.